Hi there! Welcome to this series of videos where we will be looking at the immune system of the body. We will be talking about the innate and adaptive body defenses. But as we are getting started, I do want to give a disclaimer that to really cover all of the immune system, we should probably need a whole semester, if not even a whole degree. Many of my friends specialized on immunology and spent their undergraduate and postgraduate degrees studying it and still claim that they do not fully understand it. And that is the beauty of the sciences. We are still discovering new information. So for our purposes, we will try to simply gain a general appreciation of these systems. So do not feel overwhelmed if you do not gain a full grasp of every aspect of it. And of course, I am here to help and re-explain any areas that you might feel unsure of. But do not feel bad if some of it appears confusing. Okay? So an immune system is an interesting one. It provides a defense system within the host, functioning through many biological structures and processes within that organism, with an aim of protecting it against a disease or diseases. And what I often think that is confusing for students is, or at least it was to me at the start when I first studied physiology, that it does not really fit into any of these systems that we have seen before. I mean, we have seen lymphatic system, but there is nowhere immune system in these listings of systems with different organs that make up these body systems of human. So what is going on here? Well, the reason is that immune system is rather a functional or physiological system than an organ system as such. It is closely interlinked with the lymphatic system and the white blood cells in the cardiovascular system. So this chapter is much more abstract, if you wish, as it deals with the physiology, not with anatomy. These are processes that take place rather than anatomical structures that we can pinpoint. So it's all about defense against pathogens, and the term pathogen refers to something that can cause a disease. It comes from a Greek word phatos, which means producer of either suffering or passion. So it really is any infectious agent, germs as you might know them. And there can be many different types. As you see here, viruses, bacteria, parasites, fungus, and so on. Here is a different type of list of pathogens which I have provided for you in your learning management system. I find it rather nice, but do not worry that you would have to memorize it. Just an additional resource for you to have a look at. Well, what is interesting about pathogens is that they evolve very rapidly and therefore often avoid detection and therefore neutralization by the immune system. So they can quickly result in significant problem for us. Therefore, we have multiple defense mechanisms that have evolved in the human body to recognize and neutralize pathogens. And we will have a look at these. In many species, including human, there are two major subsystems of the immune system. And these are called innate and adaptive immune systems. And if you want to describe them and compare and contrast them in a very general level, I guess that this could be one approach. While innate immune system provides very general response because of this general nature of it, it is non-specific. So protects against many different types of pathogens. This includes first and second line of defenses. These are external body membranes such as skin and mucus as the first line. And anti-microbial secretions, proteins, phagocytes, and other cells that inhibit the spreading of the invaders, with inflammation being one of the most important and best known responses. This, what I described as the last one, is the second line of defenses. This adaptive immune system is what we often think of as immunity per se. This is against specific type of diseases, so it targets specific antigens. And it is considered as what we call as the third line of defense too, being much slower than the innate system. It takes longer to react. However, what I should highlight here is that the innate and adaptive defenses are very much intertwined. They work together. For example, both of these release and recognize many of the same defensive molecules, and while innate were general non-specific, they may have specific pathways for certain substances. An innate system responses can activate adaptive system by releasing proteins that alert adaptive immunity to act on the foreign molecule in the body. So, what I am really trying to say is that although we talk about these as separate, there is also a lot of overlap, and our description as non-specific fast system versus specific slow system may be an oversimplification. So, I know that this next slide may look busy initially, but it really summarizes everything that we will be talking about on this chapter. And as always, we will go through it in parts. But I think that it is important that we have some kind of a roadmap to give us an idea of what we will cover. And that is just what this slide will do. So we will return to this slide a few times throughout this module. So, on the first video, we will focus on the innate immunity. And innate system uses the first and second line of defense to stop the attacks of pathogens. Remember, pathogens were disease-causing organisms. Let's see how this could work. So, as the first line of defense, we have physical barriers. What is a better way to stop an invader from causing harm than not letting it in the first place? So you can consider this as the walls of a fortress. We have skin that blocks many pathogens from ever getting into the body. And this is why it is a problem if we have a break in the skin, as pathogens can easily enter the body through it. Another kind of barrier, in addition to the skin, is the mucous membranes that line parts of the body that are open to the external world, but often inside the body, such as nasal cavity, oral cavity, throat, alimentary canal, urinary tract, ears, and so on. So these as well are part of physical barriers against pathogens. So first line of defense, falling under the innate immunity. Well, second line of defense contains various chemical barriers, oils, enzymes, and fluids, such as sweat and oil on the surface of our skin. Sweat is actually excellent in stopping and killing many pathogens from entering to our body. Another great example is the stomach acid. Anything that should not have made its way this far into the body often gets killed here, before these pathogens have a chance to proceed further into our body. So it as well plays a role as a protective layer. Same goes for the tears. They lubricate our eyes, but also stop pathogens from entering through this less completely protected part of our body. I was trying to think of other examples of chemical barriers, and one that I came up with was the urinary tract, and how when we urinate, we wash away pathogens that may have started to make their way up into our body through it. So we kind of rinse these to eliminate pathogens. You can notice this as, for example, in male, a need to urinate after sex. This is to clean the tract shared by the urinary and reproductive tract in male. And this leads us to a question that I wanted to ask from you. Why do females get more urinary tract infections, UTIs? Well, of course the length of this tract is shorter in female, and we do not share the reproductive and urinary tract in them. So it is a shorter distance for pathogens to enter here for females. And the last of the innate immunity that I want to mention is the various different cell responses that can place on this level too. So let's look through these, but we will keep the level of detail fairly general for our purposes, okay? There are many different kinds of responses, and they rely on recognizing that something is a pathogen and then acting on it. Let's start with phagocytes. These are white blood cells that eat foreign invaders. So, what happens in this process? Well, first the phagocyte recognizes that we have there something that should not be there. And some pathogens may try to hide in order to avoid being detected and eaten by the phagocyte. Then, it binds to the pathogen and takes it in. In our body and cells, we have lysosomes, which, as you might remember from BIO206 or BIO181, are sacs of enzymes or acids or things like that that can kill stuff. And lysosome fuses with the pathogen that has been engulfed by the phagocyte, fusing the sac with the structure where the pathogen is inside. This kills the pathogen. And any waste product can be spit out from the phagocyte. That's our phagocyte. Now, let's have a look of what we call as natural killer cells, sometimes abbreviated as NK cells. These are white blood cells that kill certain cells and promote inflammation. What we see here is a natural killer cell in yellow destroying an embryo, which is shown in pink color. Sometimes natural killer cells are described as the police of our immune system. They guard around and act if needed. And the mechanism of how they act is that they induce apoptosis in the pathogen. So that is our natural killer cells. Next, we will look at inflammatory responses as an innate defense system. Inflammation is triggered when body tissues are injured. This injury can be due to many different reasons, such as trauma, heat, chemicals, or infection, and so on. So I guess that the question that we should ask is if an inflammation is always bad news. Well, some of the benefits of inflammation include that it stops the spreading of the damaging agents, therefore localizing the problem to only one area. It helps to remove cell parts that are damaged and or not needed and removes pathogens. It alerts immune system that there is an issue, in particular the adaptive branch. And inflammation sets the conditions also ideal for the repair to take place. I think think that we should consider some signs and symptoms of an inflammation. Let's have a look at those. Well, here we see a few different kinds or a different scale of inflammations. Let's look at these and identify what characteristics we can see that would describe an inflammation. So inflammation was a response to tissue injury. And there are 4 or 5, if you ask me, major signs and symptoms of an acute inflammation. Let's look through these and consider some of the reasons as for why they might take place. First, site of an inflammation often appears red in color, right? Well, this makes sense as more blood is directed to the area that is impacted. Also, the blood vessels dilate. This is in order to try to bring more white blood cells that can deal with the potential pathogens to the site, among other reasons. Another thing that we notice is that the inflamed site is often warm. This local heat plays also an important role. It results largely from more blood being directed to the site, but what is especially important to note is that many enzymes that can act to limit the presence and spreading of pathogens and help with the repair of tissues work best in a slightly warmer body temperature. So that's why. The third sign and symptom that we see is local swelling of the site. Again, this makes sense. There is more blood and more white blood cells being directed to the area, and some of these leak also outside the vessels. There is just more stuff at the area, so it swells. The fourth one that is commonly listed is the fact that inflamed site can become sore. There might be pain in the affected area. And think about it. There is more blood flow, more material there, and also some material between the cells. It would cause soreness. This pain may also have another important protective function. By having pain, we may leave the site that is injured alone and give it sufficient time to heal and recover. So it stops us from interfering with the body's attempt to fix the damage. And this ties nicely to the fifth point that I prefer to include. There is often a loss of function if the movement or use of an area is impaired. Again, this would be protective, allowing us to give the area time to heal, but also stopping us from relying on using an area that may not be fit for purpose. So I think that this should make sense. They are very local symptoms. Can you have too much inflammation then? Of course, think of arthritis and inflammation of joints, or many of the autoimmune diseases, or fibromyalgia, where there is a constant inflammation all over the body. Another interesting aspect to consider is a discussion that has been arising in modern medicine recently. Traditionally, we have used medicine to decrease inflammation, but should we let the inflammation to take place and help in its purpose of assisting the healing process? And while we are talking about medical side of things, I want to share with you a story. It is to illustrate why proper medical terminology and use of it is so very important. So pus is this thick yellowish substance that can sometimes result. And it is in fact made of dead white blood cells, tissue and/or cells, and pathogens. And the reason why I want to share this story with you is that I have made many of the mistakes, so do not make them yourself. So remember that whenever you write something down as a medical professional, there is a good chance that it becomes a legal document that is part of the patient's medical record. So you want to be fairly smart about what you write down, right? Well, back in the day, I was teaching in another school about medical terminology, and I showed the students a picture like this. So what we see here is a cut that has pus in it, right? So if we have a cut that has blood coming out of it, we might describe it as being bloody. Or if we have a cut that when we touch it, our gloves and other material that we might use to clean it tends to stick to it, we call it sticky. Or if we have a nose that bleeds a lot, we might describe that as runny nose. I bet you can see where I'm going with this, right? So I was telling my students that you should never, ever describe this kind of cut as being pussy. Well, that is for obvious reasons, right? So to emphasize this point, I wrote that on the whiteboard and drew a big cross over the word and really tried to make sure to get my point across. And of course, that is the moment when my boss decides to step into the classroom for a class observation. So I had some explaining to do there, as I'm sure that you can imagine. So what should you do? The term that we use in medical field to describe something that has a lot of pus in it is purulent. This refers roughly to pus-like. So use it. I hope that this little story not only provides you a break from the lecture material, but also is going to help you to remember the importance of using proper medical language when making notes. And if you were not convinced of my mistake, I have some others for you. So see, it's not just me who is concerned of the lack of the use of term purulent. Okay, let's return back to this listing of divisions of different branches of immune system. And we were looking at the innate immunity and cell responses there. I think that we should move on to the anti-microbial proteins. These enhance immune defense by attacking the microorganisms and by slowing down the microorganisms' reproduction. One common one that I want to mention is the interferons. They are often abbreviated as IFN. These act to warn healthy neighboring cells and activate immune system cells. So the infected cell sends a warning to close-by cells. And even if the virus enters there to the close-by cells, they may be blocked from reproducing. I should also mention that there are about 20 complement proteins that circulate in the blood in an active form. And when they get activated, they trigger inflammation and destroy bacteria. Now, the last of the aspects of the innate immunity that we will look at is fever. I guess that a good question to start with would be, what is fever? Well, fever is abnormally high body temperature. So is fever good or bad? Well, sometimes some of its benefits include that fever inhibits microbial growth, increases metabolism, and increases phagocytosis. And I would not be a proper Finn if I did not share the following point with you. Sometimes we may generate an artificial fever in my native country, and this is called, of course, sauna. So, like I said at the beginning of this survey, when we first saw this listing, we were not aiming to cover adaptive immunity in this video. That is for later. But so far, we have done a great job of covering the innate defense system and different lines of defense in it. And that completes this video for us. In the next video, we will shift our focus to the adaptive immunity. Until that, take care.